Hello, and welcome to Talk Landscape. Today we're going to talk about nature's quiet but mighty superheroes. They filter our water, they capture carbon, they shelter biodiversity, and they even protect entire communities from storms and floods. These are wetlands, such as peatlands, mangroves, lakesides, and river deltas, and they offer incredible ecosystem services. They also have huge cultural and religious value for indigenous communities. But these ecosystems are also under huge threat due to climate change, uncontrolled urban expansion, and pollution. So they are being degraded 3 times faster than forest. So, on episode 4 of Talk Landscape, we're going to discuss why wetlands matter and what we can do to protect them with 2 inspiring guests who are restoring wetlands in rural areas and working with these ecosystems to build healthier, thriving cities across the world. Let me introduce my first guest, Dayana Blanco, the 2024 Restoration Steward for Wetlands at the Global Landscapes Forum, and the co-founder of the Uru Uru Team, an award-winning project restoring the Lake Uru Uru in Bolivia. Dayana, welcome to the show. Welcome to Talk Landscape.
Hi, Andrea. Thank you so much. I feel very honored to be here because I think it's very important for us as Indigenous peoples to amplify our voices through these platforms, but also share how we are applying our traditional knowledge to restore and take care about our ecosystems. And it is important more than never because I would say indigenous communities, we are being affected by many things like mining pollution, plastic pollution, but also the effects of climate change that are destroying our ecosystems. And unfortunately, we as indigenous women, we suffer double because when we lose access to our livelihoods, our ecosystems, we are being displaced from our lands. And when we are displaced from our lands and we must migrate to other parts and become climate refugees, we don't find many opportunities in other places because we didn't have the opportunity to access to many rights like education. So when we migrate to other parts, we suffer discrimination because we can find job opportunities. We are being disconnected from our traditions, from our roots, and from our cultural practices. And our traditional knowledge is discontinued because we are not able to pass down that important knowledge with our next generations. So I feel very honored to be here today.
Thank you so much for that inspiring opening message, Dayana. And I would like to welcome our second guest, Ingrid Coetzee, Director for Biodiversity, Nature and Health at ICLEI CBC. Welcome to Talk Landscape, Ingrid.
Thank you so much, Andrea, and also very honored and happy to be here with you. Like Dayana, I'm joining you from Victoria Falls, where the Wetlands COP is currently taking place. And it's been a really busy almost 2 weeks now. So my organization, ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, is a global network that works with cities to support them become more sustainable. And we do this through a number of different development pathways. For example, zero emission, resilience, circular development, but also very importantly, nature-based development, which is my work. And the idea of these pathways, where we work with cities, and just for those that are not familiar with ICLEI, we work with over 2,500 cities of all sizes in more than 125 countries. And this represents about a quarter of the global urban population. So we really support cities to protect their nature and their biodiversity. We focus on specifically wetland conservation at the urban and peri-urban scale, and we have been doing this for several decades. ICLEI has been part of the conventions Wetland City Accreditation Scheme since it was adopted at COP12 in 2015. And I just want to say that this is really a very unique mechanism within multilateral environmental agreements, where it focuses on how urban wetlands can make a unique contribution to biodiversity by encouraging cities. So we really are very happy to be part of this and also part of the COP. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you both for those amazing introductions to the work that you're doing, where you're coming from. Why do wetlands matter to you, Dayana?
Well, like I said, it matters because it's part of our life. If we don't have wetlands, we don't have, for example, crops, we don't have food security for our communities. So that's the reason because wetlands are very important. But also I would say it's not only important for our communities, it is important for the whole world because, wetlands, they give us clean water. They regulate the temperatures, but also the wetlands host the most richest biodiversity, especially in Bolivia, in the Lake Uru Uru. There are like more than 76 species of birds that right now are in risk of extinction. So that's the reason because it's very important. And also the waters of our wetland is part of our life because we use the water for everything. Right now, our right to access to potable water is being restricted because we can't consume polluted waters by mining activities and also by the degradation of climate change. So these kind of things are provoking that we, especially as women, lost this access, and then we need to migrate, like I said in the beginning, to other parts looking for other opportunities, and we are disconnected from our lands, something that it's very important for us as indigenous peoples. So I would say also wetlands are part of our history because we as an indigenous community, we have many rituals regarding to the connection to the water. So we have many practices that we are losing. So for that reason, for me, it's very important, but mostly I would say it is a vital source of life. If we don't have access to water, we have lost everything. We have lost our food security, our food sovereignty. We are like putting in risk to the most beautiful and diverse species of birds. Especially in the Bolivia, we have three unique species of flamingos: the Andean, the Chilean, and the James, who are disappearing, who are dying every day because they are drinking those polluted waters. At least we as indigenous peoples, we have voice, but those animals, they don't have voice. So that's the most sad part for me. So that's the reason because we must think that we are not the only ones who are being affected. Also the animals are being affected. We are not the only ones who are losing access to potable water. Also the animals are losing that access. So for that reason, the wetlands are very important, especially for us in Bolivia, the Lake Uru.
I would also like to ask everyone watching on our socials to tell us why wetlands matter to you. You might not be living 3,600 meters above the sea level, like Dayana around Lake Uru Uru and her community. You might live in a city where wetlands are also, they also play huge roles for communities in urban areas. Ingrid, what can you tell us about the importance of wetlands for people who live in cities?
Yeah, very important question. And I think that people who live in cities are only now beginning to understand how important they are. This is a knowledge, as Dayana has said, that indigenous communities have long known. But basically, for people that live in cities, they provide essential services, flood regulation, carbon storage. They're very critical for climate resilience, etc. And I think that what we tend not to understand is that they serve as natural infrastructure. They will help, absorb excess rainwater when we have floods. They can filter pollutants. They also, as Dayana said, they're biodiversity havens. And one of the things that we learned with COVID was how important it was to be able to get out to nature. Remember, those were the only places where we were safe, as it were. And increasingly, we are seeing cities around the world are recognizing that wetlands have social and cultural benefits, places of recreation, but they also often have very important cultural or spiritual meanings for local communities and urban communities. And of course, they are ecological infrastructure, and they have benefits for cities. So I want to give you two examples.
Yes, please.
Here in my own continent in Africa, Kazani Kazangulu, which is a small city at the confluence of the Chobe and Zambezi rivers in Botswana. And essentially that embraces the Chobe River floodplain, the Mambova swamps, there's many sedge islands, and it shelters more than 90,000 water birds, otters, also the biggest a population of elephant herds around here. And the people of Kazani Kazangulu are very dependent on ecotourism. For them, the wetland is their lifeline. So they have, over the past more than a decade, already started mapping the wildlife corridors. They're replanting papyrus. They're restoring their wetlands. They've also converted their sewage ponds into reed bed biofilters. So this is using nature to help filter. And I really think that, today we can see that they've got solar ferries that take tourists across the waters. They banned plastics to keep their shoreline clean. They're using school children with technology, phone-based technology, to track hippo plumes. And if we look at another city at the other side of the world, Valdivia, both of these cities are newly accredited wetland cities. Valdivia's wetlands are linked to its history and very much, the history of the devastating earthquake in the 1960s. And then in the early 2000s, there was around Chile's first Ramsar site, which was the Rio Cruce Sanctuary. There'd been a paper mill plant which was contaminating the wetland, and this decimated the local wildlife, bird life population. So the city, Valdivia, is in a sense a wetland. Wetlands are integral to its structure, to its form, and they're a very important part of basically how the city is also managed. So it's not an urban, sort of isolated from the urban environment, but really what they have done is to introduce and implement an urban wetlands law into their planning system. They safeguard their ecosystems, both with inside and with outside of the town, because they recognize how connected these systems are. And they work very closely with the local communities, with academics, scientists, environmental groups in driving restoration, also environmental education. They celebrate World Wetlands Days. And both these cities have been recognized by the convention now by being accredited as new wetland cities under the convention.
Thank you for those great examples from two different parts of the world, from Africa and Latin America, Ingrid. Dayana, when did you start seeing the ecosystems around Lake Uru Uru being damaged? What was the thing that sparked the action from your team, from your side? What were the main problems that you had to solve?
Well, like I said in the beginning, the main problems that are affecting the Uru Uru Lake, especially there are mining pollution, plastic pollution, and the effects of climate change. But it has started in 2019 when the mining companies, they have settled illegally in our lands without respecting our right to free, prior, and informed consent. And unfortunately, our authorities, they give or they grant with mining license for the operation, right? So these companies, they don't ask to the communities, they skip that important step for us, because if we are consulted about something that we know that will have negative effects on our ecosystems, we would not accept those kind of things. So that's the reason, because these companies, they go directly with the government, they skip this step, and they don't ask to the community. So in that sense, I remember that in 2019, the elders, especially women from my community, they decided to protest in front of the tribunal justices in Bolivia, asking to the Bolivian government to stop illegal mining activities. We have led 3 nonviolent campaigns, but we didn't have any positive answer coming from the government. They overlook our protests, our request for stopping illegal mining activities. So then we think about the things that were happening at that time in my community, and we say that we needed to take action, because otherwise we would have lost all our lake, all our lands, because the mining company, they wanted us to leave our lands. But we decided to resist, like you can see in the pictures, and it was a deep community work, because all the members of my community, they started to think, to collaborate, and especially I would say that intergenerational work for us was very important, because young with elders, all the members of the community were part of this. They decided to bring this solution, to say like, why we can use all the knowledge that we have. And in the past, my ancestors, they used totoras like natural purifiers. They are native aquatic plants for purifying the waters for cattle rising. But those waters were not in the conditions that the polluted waters of the lake were at the time. I remember for me it was very difficult to see how everything has changed after the mining pollution, because before, the lake's Uru Uru water were pristine, and after mining like pollution, it started to turn very like dark, with heavy odors, and we couldn't live in that conditions,
So,
even though the animals, they were trying to adapt to that situation, right? So in that sense, we decided to take action, to say, okay, let's work in a solution, let's use all the available resources. So like I say, the second problem is plastic bottles. So we decided to build floating rafts with the plastic bottles, and they act like pots for the native aquatic plants. So we place the native aquatic plants, like you can see there. They are the totoras, but they are the totoras babies. So we place those totoras into the polluted waters, and you can see in the pictures, the waters are totally dark. And it was not like that in the past. The waters of the lake, when I was 5, or yes, when I was 5, I remember that it was pristine, very clear. And always, all the members of our community, like I said, we had many rituals linked to the water. But now we can't practice that, because we are very focused on restoring our lake. So in that way, we are taking action, but like I said, guided with the wisdom of our community.
tell me a little bit about the way that the totoras work in purifying water.
So, like I said, they are native aquatic plants, and like you can see in the pictures, they need to be in the superficie of the water, and the roots need to take connection with the water, but they need to be like floating in the superficie, right? And they need to have sustainers. For that reason, for us, it's very important, the floating rafts, because otherwise they will sink.
And
So that's the reason, because
how
we
did
decided
you craft these floating rafts?
with plastic
Okay.
bottles. We put sticks, and surround the sticks. We put the plastic bottles, and that's the reason, because it keeps the balance. Because when they are babies, as you see in the first picture, they can't sink. Otherwise, they will not survive. So that's the reason, because it's important that they connect only the roots with the dark waters in the superficie, in the surface. So in that sense, we are trying to implement this solution. We have started with the plantation of 300 totoras in the beginning, and until now we have 6,000 totoras planted into the lake's polluted
That's
waters.
incredible. Ingrid, now back to you on, So you mentioned how wetlands are also being degraded in cities. Like people in urban areas are losing the benefits of living around these ecosystems that do so much more than just filter water. They also, like you said, harbor biodiversity and just offer space for recreation in cities. What have you seen in the past where have there been any solutions to coming up in cities where wetlands are degraded?
Yes, I mean, I think there are quite a few. You know, we've seen where wetlands' ability to function as kidneys, in other words, they filter, has been destroyed. There has been a lot of work done around how to reduce and avoid and mitigate the impacts of pollution. So Danya talked a lot about plastic. Plastic is a really bad culprit in this whole picture, but there are other things as well. You know, it's organic waste, effluent, urban effluent. And sadly, you know, I have to admit that if we look at the biodiversity, the wetland outlook, that was the global wetland outlook that has been brought out now recently, it identifies that urban and industrial pollution, development and infrastructure is a real problem. So also in terms of, you know, wetlands' abilities to act as sponges so that they can slow down floods, that's also become a problem because of urbanization and industrial development. And one of the things that's come in through urban development and encroachment has been things like invasive plant species. So these things clog up wetlands. And it's been, you know, increasingly we're seeing many of the wetlands globally, both in the urban and the peri-urban areas, have very similar problems. This year at COP, for example, there were 31 urban wetlands from around the world that have been accredited. And if you listen to their stories, many of them talk about these two problems. So, for example, in my own city, I live in Cape Town. Now, Cape Town was accredited at the previous COP, but we have a big problem with invasive species coming into our wetlands, clogging the rivers. And because there's so many invasive species, it also catches the pollution, whether it's plastic or tins and things that are thrown away. So there's been an extensive program to clean and to trap, first of all, clean the invasive species through a number of different types of initiatives. One of these initiatives involves using local unemployed people from particularly the youth. You know, obviously gender is also an important component of those projects. So they would help clean out the invasive species so that the wetlands and the rivers that feed these wetlands can function better. But there's also been sort of small-scale engineering, quite innovative programs that have been adopted where they put traps at certain key points in the rivers to catch all the pollution, obviously, and plastic bottles and tins and the trash that gets into these systems. Obviously, a very important part is education and awareness raising and teaching communities. And here we have a beautiful success story from the city of Nagoya in Japan, where in the 1990s, they were going to bury the Fujimai tidal flat under landfill because they needed landfill. But the citizens rebelled. And the mayor listened and realized that this, you know, that something needs to happen. So he actually announced a waste emergency. And this led to a massive awareness raising campaign around reducing and recycling waste, not just amongst the citizens, but also the industries around, because Nagoya is a very industrial city. And as a result of that very concerted effort, they were able to reduce their waste to such an extent that they didn't need that landfill. And they now have this magnificent tidal flat that's also been declared a urban wetland. And that has this incredible, I think there's about 3 different education facilities where local people, young children, older people, people from around the world can go and enjoy this tidal flat. They have great programs to raise awareness about the different plant species, the different birds, the little micro organisms that depend on the flat. And we had a group here from the Nagoya youth that really showcased what they've done and how through their action has protected their wetlands. So those are some of the examples.
And that's really inspiring to see. Back to you, Dayana, because when I first became familiar with your work last year as a restoration steward for wetlands at the Global Landscapes Forum, I was amazed by the way that you've become not only a champion in your community with the Uru Uru Team and the Indigenous women that lead this award-winning project, but you've also become a global champion for wetlands, winning awards and getting recognition worldwide, including at the COP15 going on right now in Zimbabwe, where you've received an award for your work in restoring wetlands. Yeah, your award ceremony was yesterday, and you received this this plaque congratulating you and honoring your work by leading this Indigenous-led project. And yeah, it's amazing to see how you're really becoming a true global champion for wetlands. Now, I wanted to ask you, so you've definitely made changes in your community, and you've taken action together with your team, trying to change things locally. What are you seeing on a global stage in terms of action? What do you think should be happening, such as right now during the COP15, the convention on wetlands? What do you hope to see from this conference?
No, thank you so much for your words, Andrea. It's really reconforting for me to know like more people are seeing the work that we are doing, and we are amplifying our work through these kind of platforms and also recognitions. And I would say like I came to the COP to receive the prize, but I was not like following very like near or very close the negotiations that they had. But I think like these kind of like global stage are like the most important spaces for like our governments to take action regarding the protection of our wetlands. But also, it is very challenging to know how we are being included, you know, because sometimes I can see like other communities are not here, are not part of these negotiations. And who are those community organizations who can access to these negotiations? You know that for accessing to these spaces, you need many things: accreditation, you need funding. So we need to ask who are being part of these negotiations, and are there like indigenous peoples being sidelined from these like important conversations? Because I came here, I try to like participate in different events, and I see like also my government is present here, but sometimes they are reluctant to involve
Why do you think
communities
that
because they
is?
know the things. I mean, like, because they know the things that they are doing. Like I say, they are granting mining licenses. So it means that in a way, they are not protecting the wetlands. So having conversations or holding conversations with our like government authorities from Bolivia will be not like successful because they are not interested in preserving our wetlands. So sometimes for me, those kind of things are very tough because in a way from these COPs, from these conferences, there are like positive outcomes, but also it depends on how much the government is getting involved and how much the government is committing to abide with all the outcomes that are like resulting from this COP, from these conversations. And for me, sometimes it's very difficult because even though the Lake Uru Uru is under the Ramsar Convention, I mean, the government is not respecting that. Is not respecting or not taking at least some like sustainable plans to protect the wetlands, to protect to the 76 species of birds, or avoiding the displacement of our communities. So for me, it's very challenging to know like how in the global stage we can make abide these agreements, these commitments, and but it's important, you know, because at least people can know what is happening in Bolivia. And also these kind of platforms like the Global Landscape Forum are very important because we can amplify our voices. Maybe in the local in our local space we don't have that kind of like platforms, but that's the reason because these conferences are also very important for indigenous communities. And I would say we don't need to be like sidelined from these conversations. And also these organizations, they need to understand all the challenges that we have for coming here, even though I would say the language barriers, because not many indigenous women in my community, they speak English and they can like communicate their ideas in English. So there are like double challenges for indigenous peoples to be part of these conversations. So I say like we need like that kind of like empowerment in our communities, but also we need to be part of the conversation in the local space and also in the international space. And it needs to be, I think, like supported by these organizations to bring both parts, the government, the community, to converse what's happening, you know. Because when we approach to the government or to the Bolivian delegation, yes, they are trying to like talk with us, but in a way they are overlooking because they know the things that they are doing, and they know that they will not change their perspective because it's very challenging. Maybe I am being very honest, but I like to be
Please.
honest because that's a way how we can change our world. Because if we are coming here and we are saying that everything is very beautiful, all the people, we are protecting the wetlands, you know, things will not
Yeah.
change. So we need to be very real with the things that we want to say. And that's the reason because also I had the opportunity, like I said, to talk with the Bolivian delegation and say them, hey, why you are not taking action? What things you are negotiating here if you are not taking care about Lake Uru Uru in
Yeah.
Bolivia? So it could be like challenging for them, but at least I hope that they can reflect. And it was a good opportunity to be part of this conference because at least I came here to participate and see the award ceremony for receiving my prize. But I would say also it was like a way to get involved indirectly in that kind of like
Now
dialogues.
I'm putting the spotlight on you, Ingrid, because I saw you nodding and kind of silently agreeing to what Dayana was sharing. What is your initial reaction to Dayana's comments?
Look, I think she's raised a very important aspect. And I think that maybe just to say the Wetlands Convention is a very old convention. And initially it was very technically focused. Things, you know, with the Rio Conventions, things have shifted on. So we also work in the Convention on Biological Diversity, many of the others. And in the CBD, for example, they have established major groups. So these major groups include Indigenous people and local communities, or IPLCs as they're known there. It includes local and subnational governments, the youth, there's a number of them. And they actually have a seat in the negotiations. But this is quite unique, and it is something that has been there for a couple of decades. And what I'm seeing in the Ramsar Convention, since we've been involved the past 10 or so years, things have opened up more. You know, we have now, besides the wetland accreditation scheme, which is really a recognition of what cities are doing, but there's never really been, there have been some decisions or resolutions around recognizing local government cities' roles and contributions. But we've seen this time round, for the first time, there's a decision on a draft resolution on education and participation as a basis for managing urban and peri-urban wetlands, which I think is an important step in that right direction. There's also one on enhancing the convention's visibility and synergies with other multilateral environment agreements, and which is also important because we're seeing at a global scale, these big conventions are realizing that the parties, the national governments alone, cannot address whether it's the climate crises or the challenge of the loss of biodiversity or whatever these major crises are that we find ourselves in today, and that they need the support and they need to collaborate and they need to be in partnership with other major groups. The IPLCs in the Biodiversity Convention, for the first time last year at the Biodiversity COP, they established a subsidiary body for Indigenous people and a fund that's dedicated to that. So these things are beginning to shift, but it does take a while. And I think it is important that whether it's an Indigenous community or an urban community, that those voices are raised and that people stand up and say, you know, we're concerned, there's not enough being done. We want to protect our wetlands. I mean, the example from the Uru Uru Team, from the Goya that I gave, where the citizens got up and said, no, we don't want the waste to be, you know, to cover our floodplain. So those are really important things. And I think the more that those voices are raised and the more consistently this happens, we're going to see that the parties will start recognizing. I mean, we've already seen that global organizations, the UN bodies are saying, you know, that local, on the ground organizations, governments are important role players in protecting and addressing climate, biodiversity, water security, food security, land degradation, etc. I hope that responds to your question.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for kind of responding to Dayana's comments and concerns. Not that you have to directly respond, but it's very, very useful to have also your perspective, Ingrid, as you have over 30 years working with nature-based solutions in sustainable urban planning. Now, I wanted to ask both of you, actually, what do you think comes next in a space where sometimes things might feel out of control or that we cannot do enough? And I want to start with you, Dayana. What makes you feel powerful?
I think like something that makes me feel powerful is the community work that we are doing. Like I say, deep community work is the only solution right now for me. Because I think like if something is not coming from our authorities, we as people, as communities, as cities, as different group, because I would say sometimes they say, yes, but you are an indigenous community, you have the involvement. Yes, because we care about our community, we care about our lakes.
I think we unfortunately just lost Dayana, which is very unfortunate because she was just sharing such a nice, impactful message. I hope we get Dayana back with us. But in the meantime, I want to pose a question for everyone watching in the chat. How do you feel powerful? How do you feel like you can actually make an impact in your community? I see people tuning in from Madagascar, talking about the importance of wetlands for biodiversity, for food, for fresh and clean water, and for cleaning their ecosystems. Also, someone highlighted the importance of wetlands for educational purposes. Just like you mentioned, Ingrid, education being such an enormous pillar of thriving cities with thriving wetlands. So yeah, just leaving that question open for everyone in the chat as well. What makes you feel powerful? What makes you feel like you can actually create impact? I see that Dayana is back with us. So let's continue with what you were saying, Dayana. I'm so sorry. I guess you lost connection for a little bit.
Yes, the internet is very low here. But like I said, it is very important for now, like to know us, like we have that power as human beings, as people, and we need to get involved with many communities, with many, like I think like this kind of deep community work for me, it's something that also it's very rooted in the intergenerational collaboration, something that's all come to work together, kids, young, elders. And I think like the real actions that are coming are mostly from us. For example, like I said, we started with 300 totoras planted into the polluted waters. And then now we have 6,000. So that is the power that we have as a community. And I'm sure that also, like in the city, like Ingrid was telling, also they are taking action, and the same like effects that are affecting us, I heard from Ingrid, that also are affecting the cities. And I would say in our case, it's disconnecting us from our roots, from our traditions. And even though I would say, like, we as young people, we don't see the city like a place to live, because we don't have that kind of freedom to enjoy our landscapes, to enjoy everything that we want. Because for me, for example, the city is very overcrowded. We don't have that kind of, like, I don't know, opportunity to be like in front of a lake, something that it's very important, even though for our mental health, for our well-being, like human beings, So for me, it's very important to know that we need to recover that harmony that in my native dialect we called sumaki, that means peace with Mother Earth. It's something that we are losing. And I think like the only thing that can help right now us is taking action, tangible actions. Even though like one plant into the polluted waters right now means a lot. So I hope like many people can take those kind of actions. And written papers are very important because they protect us, they protect the wetlands, they protect the ecosystems. But I would say tangible actions like planting trees, planting totoras, they are more important because those actions are having impact in our ecosystems.
Ingrid, I wanted to ask basically the same question to you. You've given us such inspiring and hopeful examples of how cities can or are thriving with wetland ecosystems. Where do you think lies the key to actually creating change beyond multilateral agreements and beyond these, government-based decisions? What keeps you going? What gives you hope?
Okay, I hope I'm hearing you correctly because my Wi-Fi is also not very reliable. But in terms of what gives me hope, besides the amazing initiatives that we see coming from the ground level, whether it is an Indigenous community like that of the Uru Uru Team that Dayana is leading, or whether it's from cities, I think that, when we look at things at a global level, we are starting to see stronger commitment. We, for example, at the political level, the high-level segment, recently adopted the Victoria Falls Declaration on protecting wetlands for the future. And that recognizes a number of things. For example, the role of wetlands in achieving the SDGs, but also the need for an integrated approach to wetland conservation and restoration. Now, I realize these things are paper and it's very nice, fluffy political statements. But there are two things for me that I think are absolutely critical. And the one is that we certainly, at the point Dayana made about action, the need for a lot more action. And I'm hoping that out of this COP, we will see strong resolutions in support of action across all levels of government, all sectors of society. We need to recognize the role that women play, that cities, big and small, play, that Indigenous communities play, but also the role that business, big corporates, the mining sector can play. And we need to shift that trajectory because there's so many stories where wetlands are being destroyed by industrial development. And it's such a short-lived, short-scale investment into profit, which doesn't ultimately help us. But I think something else that I'm hoping for is that with this focus on wetlands, and I think this COP has managed to do that, whether it's through the work of cities or Indigenous communities or the countries, that there will be increased investment from whether it's the multilateral development banks, the big finance institutions, the private sector. So many of the stories that I've heard are doing amazing work. And it's great work, whether it's at the ground level or transboundary level or urban or peri-urban level. But all of them have indicated the need for greater investment, for more money, so that we can scale out these initiatives on the one hand, but also on the other hand, ensure that it's sustainable, that it doesn't just last for 1 or 2 years. We need to maintain our wetlands going on into the future. I think, Danya, you talked about that notion of intergenerational conservation, which is so important. So yeah, I think that increased, definitely more action. We can never do enough. Now is the time to take action, but also to support that action, we need more investment into our wetlands, into our tidal flats, into the communities that do preserve and protect them. Thanks.
Thank you. And just a quick follow-up on investment and the need to increase these for wetland protection. What do you think the pathways there are? Are you seeing any solutions, any way out of the huge investment needs?
So I think the answer is yes and no. It's probably not happening fast enough. What is interesting is to realize that at the global biodiversity agendas through the Convention on Biological Diversity and this convention, there have been calls to address this biodiversity funding gap. We all know that the funding gap is something incredible. I think it's something like $200 billion per year that we need to invest. So many of the big funding mechanisms like the Global Environmental Facility and several of the others are pushing for more money to come in. But also the interesting thing that we're beginning to see is that there are more innovative finance mechanisms that are coming to play. Where some of the need for financing is not just being parked at the door of governments, global or public institutions, but also that increasingly industry and the business sector is being called to invest in biodiversity, whether this is through investment of conservation of wetlands within catchments or particular areas or whatever. So, and I think that also we're beginning to see, certainly in certain parts of the world, a growing interest in mechanisms such as the water bonds or the green bonds or other mechanisms to bring funding in. Partnerships between local communities and business to support local projects for conservation of wetlands. And there are many other instruments that are around. Some of them are fairly controversial or potentially can be controversial, such as the so-called credits, which are new. But I do think that there is a shift. The concern is that, as many of the cities have said, they need money now to help solve the waste problem, or to protect, to remove invasive species, or to help with urban encroachment and industrial encroachment. And Waiting another 10 years is not going to help at all. The need is now for action on the ground. So, yeah.
What about, how was it in your case, Dayana, with trying to secure funding for the Uru Uru project? How did you navigate this, and what do you think should be done to increase funding for restoration action?
I would say like it is very important for now for us as we realize that this kind of like I don't know seeds funds were very important to know and to like be close how to for example write proposals, how to like connect with organizations that are working in the restoration field. But for us it is very important for my community especially to know that we need to be the enablers of our project. We need to decide what we want to do because we know our needs, we know our challenges. And sometimes it is very important also for us to have this kind of training to know like management capacities and different things because I would say if we are equipped with that, we can have like more possibilities to unlock different funding opportunities because also that is the biggest challenge because not many for example women in my community they have formal education, so it makes more complicated for them to write like proposals. So sometimes we the young from my community we try to write some proposals, and it is the way how we have started and how it has worked because for example the global landscape forum was like a big supporter in the way that they work with us in a way that it's very horizontal, right? It's not like hierarchical because also we had the experiences where like some organizations they want to give us all the things that they think that we need, but in the real field it's not working because it's not responding to the needs. So for us it will be very important to navigate in this field of funding to have more trainings that can like give this possibility for more women, more members from the community to be able to write proposals because right now we are doing that, but I would say mostly we are young, the new generation who had the possibility to access higher education. So for me, it would be very interesting also that these organizations that give, like for example, the biggest like funding, they can have the trust in the community because sometimes also we saw that it's through intermediaries and the real money that needs to be placed to the community is not going to the community. So for that reason, also we are not escalating in the way that we can escalate with that, to the next level. If we have all the funding, we can do marvelous things. But like I said, the most important for me would be like to train more women, have that trust in women, and also have that trust in the community, and know that the community has the capacity, has the knowledge to respond to their needs. And also something that to end maybe this answer would be like they need to trust also in traditional knowledge that we have because sometimes I think like they look for validation, scientific validation, but also indigenous knowledge is like having like positive results like you saw in the pictures of my project. They are growing into the polluted waters. I remember that we had worked with some organization in the beginning and they say like no, it will not work because they are plants, they will not survive in those like dire situations. But after that, we have demonstrated that they have survived and they are doing the work. And we have tested with the university because after that, after seeing the solution, many allies came to join our project to support us in a different way. And the university helped us with the testing of the waters, and they show with real results that it's having impact. It's purifying the polluted waters. So that's the reason because for me that would be very important to trust in the community, to train the community, and also to place that fund to the community to like give that opportunity to the community to manage the project, because we know our needs. So with that, I end the answer to the question.
And thank you so much, Dayana, for such a comprehensive, inspiring answer. You're inspiring already people in the chat, saying how capacity development is key, how we need to provide support packages directly to local communities so they can make the decisions. They can manage their wetlands effectively and sustainably. Thanks to everyone chiming in on the chat there in this wonderful conversation. We have a few more minutes left. So yeah, we've talked about the importance of indigenous and scientific knowledge, about the importance of education to build resilience together with wetlands. And I think one of the key messages here, or at least one of the key takeaways for me, is the need to do deep community work, like you said, Dayana, and to acknowledge how important it is for both rural and urban areas as well. You've shared some wonderful examples as well, Ingrid. Thank you both so much for joining the conversation. I would like to give the floor to, well, Ingrid first for any final messages on how to build healthier ecosystems, healthier cities together with wetlands.
Thanks. I think we've almost said everything. The capacity building one is very important. You get the same problem in cities, and we try our best to help cities build capacity and skills around developing project proposals on the one side, but on the other side, navigating this minefield of the finance sector. But there's one other thing that I think is really, really important, and Dayana, you referenced it, and that is the one about data. Having the data and measuring what we are doing so that we know where the gaps are and what the impact really is and how to address it. And I do think that this is also an area that we would need to look at. There is a lot of data out there. It's not always captured systematically. Some of it is with the indigenous communities, but that information and the data doesn't get necessarily to the authorities. But also at a local level, many of the cities are dependent on universities because they don't have their own in-house skills and data systems. They might be very small municipalities. So I think data, information gathering, reporting, and measuring the impact of the work that's done and the scale of the destruction and the pollution of our wetlands is also important if we're going to be able to better manage and protect our wetlands going forward.
I also want to highlight a comment from Lorraine on the importance of having local communities as co-creators in the solutions, not only having them as end users. And Dayana, you are a key example of this with the work that you continue to do with Uru Uru, how much you've grown and how much recognition you are getting around the world. What would you say to everyone watching today as a final message for this conversation on how wetlands can help us thrive?
Well, I would say that it's very important to know that we need to find an equilibrium with all the species, because all of us, we are part of this world. Sometimes we think that we are the most important species, but also there are other more important species. And it's something that we have learned as a community to have that kind of harmony with other animals, with other human beings in this world. So for us, it's very important to recover that balance with the earth. And also for me will be like very important to be guided with a principle that we have in my community, that in my native dialect is suma kamanya, which means living well. And living well means take care also of our wetlands, of our ecosystems, and know that also what kind of future we want to leave to the next generations. Maybe tomorrow we will not exist in this world, in this terrenal world, but also what kind of future we are living for the next generation. And I think like that's the reason, because we always ask that we want to live a better future. If, for example, something is happening to the lake Uru Uru, we say at least we have tried. We have like done our part, and we feel very happy for that because we have taken action. So that's the most important. Like I said, written papers, they are very important because they protect our human rights. Even though in Bolivia we have rights for Mother Earth, it is very weird, but in Bolivia nature is recognized like a legal entity. But when we have to put in practice those laws, they are not applicable because they are not effective. So for us, all these challenges have taught us that the most important are the actions, the real actions. If you are planting trees, if you are planting totoras, that's helping to the ecosystem. And something to end, I would say also nature tries to reward, because when we are planting in these like difficult and challenging situations, all the flamingos comes to us and they start to chirp, so that's very beautiful and rewarding for us. So with that, I ended with my question.
This is wonderful. Thank you both so much for joining. Thanks to everyone watching live. Tune into the next episode of Talk Landscape, the live podcast that goes on every month. With that, we wrap up today's conversation. But I would like to invite everyone to subscribe to the Talk Landscape newsletter so you don't miss any new episodes. You can scan the QR code or follow the link that's being shared there in the chat to be part of these and following conversations. Thanks, everyone, and see you next time. Bye.
Bye.